This project is definitely my most ambitious client project to date, and it is also a project of many firsts for me. It's the first time that I'm using my slab flattener that I built a few months ago. It's the first time working with a slab of this value, and it's also my first time using a domino jointer. But those aren't the only things adding pressure when it came to this build. The biggest thing that created pressure for me was the fact that the client gave me full creative freedom. And I know for a lot of people that probably sounds like a walk in the park. But when the client hasn't seen any physical sketches and all the design elements and the blueprints are only living inside my head, everything has the potential to go really pear-shaped. And you have no idea if the client's going to even accept the piece until it's done. So this project wasn't just about building a bar. This project was really about backing myself and believing in myself that I can deliver something that not only the client's happy with, but something I can be really proud of. And I'm really trying to push myself to build an heirloom quality piece of furniture here that can be passed down for generations. And I realized really early on that this was not just about pulling together all my skills and everything I've learned as a maker and a woodworker, but also overcoming the mental barriers that came up time and time again throughout this whole build process. The biggest thing I had to overcome was actually my anxiety. And the remedy really was just slowing down and taking one step at a time. Even just taking the initial step to cut this slab down to a rough size so it would fit on the slab flattener absolutely crippled me. And I don't know how many days it took me to build up the courage to throw it on the workbench and cut it, let alone even using the slab flattener. But I'm so grateful for builds like these because it allows me to work through that anxiety and grow as a maker and a woodworker. And once I actually fired the slab flattener up, after the first pass, I completely relaxed because this thing was effortless to use. I could actually do passes just pushing it back and forth with one finger. And I'm extremely proud of myself because I built this thing with my own two hands and my crazy brain. And if you want to check out the build, I'll pop a link in the description. It is epic. And if you're not sure what a slab flattener is or what it does, it is as it sounds. It essentially flattens a slab. If you've got defects or say you've got a big bow in your slab, you can level it off, flatten one side, flip it over, flatten the other side, and then you have a perfectly level and flat slab to work with. So once I had the slab all nice and flat, I then had to go through and sand the heck out of this thing, like 3 hours non-stop sanding. It left a bunch of milling marks in from the cutter head going backwards and forward. So I started off with the belt sander with 80 grit, and then I transitioned to the orbital sander with 120 grit. I didn't go any lower than that because the slab's going to require some more finishing. It's got a few defects and a few voids that I'm going to have to pour some epoxy into. Now, if you know me, I don't normally like using epoxy. However, anytime you're working with a slab, especially one of this size, you can almost guarantee that it's going to need some kind of filling somewhere or some kind of structural reinforcement. Now, the reason I picked this particular beautiful slab of Jarrah, not only has it got the most amazing checkerboard grain pattern, it also has minimal defects. It's got a bit of a bow in it and hence the slab flattening. But apart from that, it's only going to need very minimal touch-ups. So I've gone ahead and cleaned up all the voids and scraped all the sap out of the sap pockets. Then I've mixed up some epoxy and then we can start filling all these defects. Now this isn't exactly a first for me, but I've only used epoxy a couple of times. And for this particular project, I decided to use a crystal clear casting resin because it's much more temperature stable. Our days here are pretty warm and our nights are really cold. And being that this is going to take a couple of days to cure and it's sitting in a shed, I wanted something that was a bit more temperature stable with less shrinkage. And being that this resin is so crystal clear, I decided not to tint it with any color or pigment with the hopes that you'll be able to see down into these voids, and I thought it might be pretty cool. And once I had the epoxy poured, I could set it aside to dry and focus my attention on picking the timber for the legs and all the bracing. And now's probably the perfect time to talk to you about my overall vision for this piece. It has to stand at a height of around 1100 millimeters. The client specified that they do want an open design. They don't want any panels enclosing everything, so it needs to be nice and airy. And because this is going to double as a standing height desk, they have to be able to get stools or their feet right in under it. So rather than having a center brace at the middle, it's going to have 2 side braces and a rear brace that'll sit up against the wall. And being that it's not going to have any feature panels and it's going to have an open frame design, I really need to think about how I'm going to incorporate some design and some detail into this frame to make it look more than just a few legs and a couple of braces, which works perfectly for me because those are the things that get me out of bed in the morning. I love working with fine details, and I really enjoy the things that at a distance you don't really notice it, or even as you approach the piece you still might even notice it. But if you choose to study this piece and spend some time with it, all the little subtle details will start to reveal themselves. So in order to achieve that level of ooh la la, I decided to incorporate a series of fluting or channels in all the bracing. This will help break up a lot of the blockiness of the frame. This will also elevate the piece and add a sort of classic or vintage sort of flair to it. Now I know this detailing probably seems a bit complex or challenging to achieve for a lot of people, but I'll tell you, the process is actually quite simple and straightforward. All I did was put a round over on all the pieces, the legs and the braces. Then I took all the braces and I found the center of each brace and made a pencil mark. After that, I chucked up a small cove bit into my router table. Then I attached my feather board so I wouldn't get any kickback on the panel, and then proceeded to follow that center line and feed all the braces through, creating that cove detail the length of all the braces. Now, something I'd like to mention, if you're doing this kind of work, particularly in timbers as dense and hard as Jarrah, just take your time. Don't try and take it all off in one pass. Do a light pass, raise your blade or raise your cutter, then do another pass, raise your cutter, do another pass. If you try and push it through, there's a really good chance that you'll end up bending or destroying your router bit, or your router bit may even work itself out of the router and potentially cause you an injury. Now, another design choice I decided to incorporate in this fluting is to have the center channel or center flute deeper than the outside ones. This is not something that you'll notice visually, but on a tactile level, if you run your hand over it, you'll notice that the center one is a little bit deeper. And in woodworking, it's not just the visual details that you should be thinking about. A lot of the time when people see wood, their first reaction is to touch it or run their hand over it. And if they choose to run their fingers through all this fluting, they'll notice that I paid attention and I chose to add a little bit more character where some other makers might not think to. And after I had my fluting cut in, it was time to get nice and comfy in my favorite workshop chair and settle in for a full day of sanding. I'm not even kidding, I think there was over 8 hours of hand sanding and all this fluting, and my hands were completely destroyed by the end of it. And once I had my leg and brace details sorted out, it was time to turn my attention back to the slab and sanding this epoxy. It had had a couple of days to dry, so it was time to knock it down with the orbital sander. After that, we can turn our attention to cutting this slab to its final size and then get on with the shaping. Now, I wanted to put rounded corners on this slab, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, it'll tie in aesthetically with all the roundovers on the braces and the legs, and two, because it's at like 1100mm high, it is the perfect head height for kids. And given that this is a commission for someone that has grandkids, I wanted it to be safe. Now, when it came to choosing the edge profile for this slab, I went down a rabbit hole for literally hours. And what I found out is there is like an infinite amount of different combinations of roundover and chamfer and just all different angles and all different sizes. And I got completely overwhelmed, but I ended up settling on something that I now know is called a stingray profile, which is a roundover on the top and a 45-degree chamfer on the underside. I like the stingray profile because it creates that nice soft round edge on the top, but underneath it's just slightly elevated and it just gives it a really nice sharp crisp line to finish the detailing off. Now that pretty much concludes all our shaping and detailing, and now it's time for assembly. And to kick that off, I'm going to go and cut all the leg pieces and all the bracing pieces to their right size, starting with the legs. And that's pretty easy. All I did was worked out my overall height minus the thickness of the top, and that gave me the length of the legs. When it came to the braces, I was a little bit more nervous to cut these because I had so much invested in them, like literally a couple of days of shaping and sanding and getting them ready to this stage. I was really nervous that I would cut them too short and have to start all over again. But because I checked my measurements about 9,000 times and just constantly kept cross-referencing everything, I eventually worked up the courage, cut everything, and it worked out okay, so happy days. So my original plan for tying the top two braces together was to use domino joins between the two braces. But because I've incorporated all the fluting on the inside of the frame now, which wasn't part of the original plan, I can no longer do that. So I've come up with what I think is a really genius solution of using this 35mm dowel as kind of like a mortise and tenon. But because of the fluting, I can't just go and mark locations to drill some Forstner holes in the frame. So I had to make a little jig, which is simple as taking an offcut of wood, punching a 35mm hole through it, and then I'll connect another piece to the top that will allow me to clamp it to the part of the frame and drill my holes. And this worked out so well, and I was so proud of myself for coming up with this solution, and it worked out in so many other ways, which you'll see a little bit down the line. And to work out the size of my dowels, all I did was find the depth of the holes and added that to the overall width of the frame, and that gave me the length to cut the dowels. To attach them was as simple as putting some really strong wood glue in the hole, spreading it around and tapping the dowel in. Now, this is something that I was so happy with. I'm kind of coining it as my signature way of connecting table frames together from now on. Now that I've got this top part of the frame made, I can go ahead and work out the rest of the dimensions for all the other bracing. By offering up a couple of offcuts from the legs and putting them in place, then I can grab a measurement between them, and that will give me the perfect measurement for the side bracing. And once again, because of that fluting on the inside of the braces, I couldn't get an accurate mark to line up my domino. So to overcome that, I just chucked a piece of tape on, then I can put the mark on the tape and use that as my guide. And this moment is a very exciting milestone for me because I've been saving my pennies for a really long time in order to afford myself a domino jointer. And if I'm being completely honest, I couldn't be more humbled that this day has finally come. And I couldn't do it without the support of clients like this taking a chance on me, and also having the support from you guys of tuning in every fortnight to check out Dino builds and backing what I do. So thank you, legends. And I was initially a little bit nervous to fire this thing up and use it for the first time, but after reading through the instructions, watching a couple of YouTube videos, and doing a couple of test pieces, the nerves settled and I just got stuck into it. And it was everything I hoped it would be. Very smooth to use, very ergonomic, lightweight, and just super easy to operate. So once I got all my mortises cut with the domino jointer, I could then go forward and glue in all my tenons and put these leg/side panel assemblies together. And guys, if you want to support me further and help me grow, another really great way you can do that is by going over to dinobuilds.com and checking out my website. I've got some really cool merch over there, and for the month of June, everyone who spends over 100 AU dollars, I will chuck in a bonus sticker pack. And when I cut all my braces to size, I sanded in a little chamfer on the end of all this fluting detail, but for some reason, on the short pieces, the side leg pieces, I forgot to do that. So I'm going to go through and knock it all in with the chisel. And now that we've got all our components made, we can put this frame together once and for all. And this is where putting those dowel pieces in came as another blessing, because it gave me something to clamp off when attaching the side/leg panels to the main part of the frame. And I actually forgot to film putting the last long brace in, but I just put it together and held it in place with a couple of ratchet straps while the glue dried. And these dowels are the gift that just keep giving, because they have a third and final function. I'm going to use them to attach the top to the base. So I need to drill some holes in these dowels, and the holes need to be really precise. This piece is way too big to fit on my drill press, so I'm going to use my portable drill press. However, because the dowel is round, it's really hard to get this portable drill press to sit stable. So I'm going to cut some blocks the same size as the dowel and screw them to either side of the portable drill press, and that'll give me more stability. So to attach the top to the frame, I'm going to use some little domed hex head bolts. And there's a couple of things I need to think about here. One, I don't want the bolt head to protrude through, and I'm going to start with a countersink that's larger than the outside diameter of the head of the bowl. From there, I'll drill a hole that is larger than the outside diameter of the shaft of the bowl. And that way, if there's any seasonal wood movement, there'll be enough wiggle room to allow the top to expand without tearing the frame apart. So I forgot to film this drilling the holes in the bottom of the slab for the threaded inserts. You saw me go through and mark everything with one of the brad point drill bits. Now, these are just 𝗟𝗡𝗄 inserts off Amazon. No idea where they're made, probably China. And I was kind of warned about this, not to buy the cheap ones because you'll just have a lot of trouble with them. And I chose not to listen and just take the gamble, and I'm kind of regretting it a little bit now because these are designed to go with a 10mm drill bit in order to get a really good tight fit. But I did 2 test holes. The middle one is 10mm, and torquing it down, like I didn't even get it to sit flat, and it split the outer ring. So I thought I'd do a 10.5mm drill bit, and I got it down a little bit further, but it did the same thing, it still split. So then I went up to an 11mm drill bit, and that worked, but I'm just worried, like it's not loose, like it's in there, like it's tight, like I had to torque it down, but I think I'll just put a bit of 5-minute epoxy in the hole, and it will just help give it a bit extra grab, a bit of extra strength. But yeah, there's a lesson there for Dino. Don't be a tight ass and don't scrimp. Next time, I'll get the good stainless steel ones. And once I had all my threaded inserts in place, I could go and do a test fit of the top and the base together. And good news, everything fit. I'll spare you the details of me screwing all the bolts in, and let's go and check out the finishing process. For the base, I just use my trusty old favourite orange oil that I use on most of my products. It's easy to apply, it's reasonably hard wearing, but for the top, I knew it needed to have something a bit more robust. So I decided to go with a polyurethane. I've never used this particular polyurethane, and they advertised it as no sanding between coats. So that was the thing that really sold me. And considering how much sanding I'd done in this project, I was all up for that. So once I had my frame all oiled up, I turned my attention to the top and just getting it done. Now, I cleaned this thing within 1 inch of its life, and then when I thought it was clean and had no dust on it, I cleaned it again and then cleaned it again. And with all the work that I'd put into fine-tuning this slab and getting it sanded and smooth and beautiful as it is, I was so nervous to be applying a new product that I'd never used before. But I decided to just bite the bullet and just get it done. And initially, pouring this out of the container and seeing that it was white, it made me a little nervous because I'm like, how is this going to dry crystal clear as it's advertised if it's white? But I decided to trust the process and just start applying it. And I have to say, using the high density foam roller was the right choice because this stuff spread so beautifully. Even though I was extremely happy with the end result and this product gave an exceptional finish, I don't 100% agree with the non-sanding between coats. I think there's always room for improvement, and there's always room to make things a little better. I am so glad that I took this project on, and I learnt so many things along the way. Not only about making and woodworking, but also about myself and what I'm capable of if I just take a chance on myself and push myself a little bit further. And putting in the extra effort when it comes to the details, things like continuing that fluting on the inside of the rails and what I managed to come up with those dowels. It just goes to show you never really know what you're capable of until you commit. In saying that, I think this is my best video yet, and I really hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. I couldn't do this without you guys, and I appreciate your support, and I'll catch you on the next one, legends. Peace.